Hey, what's up, Obi Tribe? Thanks for joining me today. Today we are going to be tackling a big question that we're seeing more and more. See, a lot of ultralight hikers and through hikers are now switching to top quilts and sleeping on the ground. Traditionally, top quilts were designed to be used in hammocks. However, lots and lots of people are using them on ground setups. So let's tackle the pros and the cons of using top quilts versus sleeping bags, and let's see what is the right setup for you. There's a lot of advantages and disadvantages to both, and I don't think there's one right answer. So let's dive into this, see what's right for you, and cover the details. All right, so let's just tackle the biggest and most important thing that is causing so many people to switch over, and that is the weight. So in this example, we're going to be comparing bags that are 20 denier in materials and 800 fill power down. In the prototypes that we have right now of a top quilt, that's coming in at 1 pound 8 ounces, which is really, really light. So how are top quilts lighter? Well, for starters, on the back side, they are just open, which means that you don't have a zipper to get in and out of it. You don't have extra material wrapping around you, and then also you're cutting out the extra amount of insulation that is needed. So you're cutting out a lot of weight. And as you cut out the weight, what you're also getting is reduced cost. So advantage of a top quilt is you should be able to get a comparable top quilt to a sleeping bag at a reduced price. So one advantage of a top quilt over a sleeping bag is that you can get in and out of it easier. If this is all cinched up, your hands can simply pop out the sides, get to what you need, or you can pop this up and over your head to exit the top quilt. The other advantage is it is a little bit more forgiving of temperature ranges. That's something that a lot of people are mentioning, is that with a top quilt you can just cover a different variety, because I can either button this up and get it really cinched well around me, or I can lay it over me like this, use it as a blanket, vent it easier, pull one leg out and in. Now, that's an advantage that a lot of people are stating, but I would challenge that and say that you could do the same thing with a sleeping bag if you fully unzip it and use it kind of like a top quilt, where you punch your feet into the bottom of it and lay it over you like a sleeping bag, or excuse me, like a top quilt. All right, so let's dive into some of the disadvantages of a top quilt. Number one being the draft. When you move around at night, there's that potential to expose part of your body and let in cold air. Now, you'll notice we've got pad straps right here that you can connect your top quilt into to hold it onto your pad and to eliminate some of those drafts. But that is a major disadvantage of a top quilt, is there's more potential for drafts. To help eliminate some of those drafts, make sure that when you are buying a top quilt, you get a wide top quilt. The wider it is, the less option there is for those drafts. I typically recommend that you're going to get something 54 inches wide or wider if you are looking to sleep on the ground with your top quilt. Another disadvantage that I would say of a top quilt, though, is you are going to lose the hood of your sleeping bag, and so you're going to have to pack something like this. This is a down balaclava. You're going to have to sleep in this as your hood. That is a disadvantage because it's an extra piece that you have to buy. However, it does have multiple uses other than just sleeping in it, so I kind of think it has some advantages there. But overall, I would put that down as a disadvantage, is it's just not an all-encompassing system. You are going to have a hood of a jacket or a balaclava or something like that to keep your head warm. The last thing I want to mention with this top quilt is you do need an insulated pad. While you still need an insulated pad with a sleeping bag, and it is extremely important, it's crucial to a top quilt. If your pad popped or anything happened to it, you didn't have a repair kit, you'd be sleeping on the sticks, and that could get cold or very, very uncomfortable. So an insulated pad is very critical to a top quilt, although it can be argued, and it's very true, that an insulated pad is also needed for a sleeping bag. All right, so let's jump over to a sleeping bag setup, and I'm actually going to start with the disadvantages, which are pretty inherent after you go over the top quilts. So first, you're going to have a heavier item. It's just going to be heavier. In this comparison of 20 denier items with 800 fill power duck down, you're looking at about a pound of gained weight. So you cut out a whole pound by switching to that top quilt. Also, in its compressed size, obviously the top quilt is going to be smaller, so a disadvantage for a sleeping bag is it's going to be slightly bigger in its compressed state for packing. And then last would be cost. There's just more material and more labor that's going to be involved in making a sleeping bag, so the cost is typically going to be higher in that sleeping bag. So what are some of the advantages of a sleeping bag? Well, the main advantages, in my opinion, happen right up here. You've got a hood, you have draft collars and cinch cords to cinch out everything. So one that's going to cinch around your face, and then obviously on the inside of here you've got a shoulder collar as well that's going to cinch down. And so it's just going to be way simpler and way easier to seal this thing up. And so there's some added value in a sleeping bag, just knowing that there's no learning curve. With the TopQuilt, there is a little bit of a learning curve in getting used to using that TopQuilt. So other than that, it's pretty straightforward with the sleeping bag as far as advantages and disadvantages. So what's the right answer for you? That's the question we've all been asking. And as I've tested and used multiple systems, and over the years, I've kind of developed a system that I feel like works for me. It's kind of similar to hammock camping versus ground camping in that aspect. But what I personally like to do is I'm going to be using a TopQuilt for any of my 3-season adventures. So spring, summer, fall, I'm going to be using a TopQuilt. Anytime that it's getting down, might break into the teens, I'm going to be using a TopQuilt, mainly because of just the weight savings. I mean, yeah, I'd prefer to be in a sleeping bag, just because of how simple and easy it is. But to get those weight savings, I'm going to go with the TopQuilt those 3 seasons. But there is a 4th season, and this is where things change a little bit for me. You see, in that 4th season, and if you haven't done this before, when you're sleeping in that 4th season, it's really easy to lose body heat and struggle to regain it. When you drop below the teens and into the single digits or below 0, it is really cold, and unless you've experienced it, it's hard to explain. So for me, I start to really enjoy a sleeping bag in the aspect that there's no potential drafts. If I was sleeping in a TopQuilt and I rolled over and I got a little bit of a draft and I woke up after I had already gotten cold, it's going to be harder for me to warm back up when it's in that 4th season. So for me personally, I like a sleeping bag for that 4th season. Some of you are saying, well, I can't afford to have both systems, and that makes total sense. And this is why this 3rd option is also one that I think is very, very viable. That would be to pair your TopQuilt with a sleeping bag that you maybe already have. Maybe you already have a summer sleeping bag or something like that. But by pairing them, you might be able to pull that down into a single digit or 0 degree system. So you could take a sleeping bag like this, you could take your TopQuilt, simply slide your TopQuilt over the top of it, and use pad straps to hold that TopQuilt on top of you, and use it much like a modular system. And that's definitely something that I think a lot more people should look at, because there is not one sleeping bag that's going to cover all ranges of temperatures. So looking at something modular can be very, very nice. So in short, for 4-season type stuff, I do prefer a sleeping bag or a modular system. For 3-season stuff, I really think there are a lot of advantages to TopQuilts. I think you should be looking at them very seriously for 3-season stuff. The weight savings, you just can't ignore them. And then you're packing less, might be saving a few bucks. So TopQuilts definitely get it for summer, spring, fall for me. If you have any questions about what might be right for your situation, make sure to go over to OutdoorVitals.com, where we can chat with you there, or reach out to us at support@OutdoorVitals.com. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe. Tell us in the comments what other questions you have. We love tackling questions like this and trying to help you out with your next adventure.